Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Stan Kroenke discovered in his home in deep depression after dispiriting loss late last night. And his team also lost the Super Bowl. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's right. Stan, I don't even know if he would have been aware that the Rams didn't win the Super Bowl after trying to recover from what was a dispiriting loss at Manchester City. One can only surmise that he eventually was apprised of what happened in Atlanta. And it was almost as thrilling for him as what happened in Manchester. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to do it with Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Tim, and welcome back.
Hello, thank you. Yeah,
good to have you back. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive, and I guess you're always here, so, good to talk to you again.
He sounds so excited. Hello,
hello. We're going to get in a big fight today, so I'm looking forward to it. I want to thank everybody for getting involved and listening and all that, and if this is the last time you ever listen because of the performance that I have incoming, then I apologize. But I do want to make this point. I think Andrew on the Arscast, Arsbug, that guy, made a really good point today, which is that, look, we're doing a podcast. So we're going to do a podcast about the Manchester City game. Now, you could argue, we just shouldn't even bother because it's not worth analyzing. But if you're going to do a podcast, then, you have to say, honestly, what you think went right. And, unfortunately, in the majority, what went wrong. And that means the players, but also the manager. Now, I want to be clear about this, right? I can say all the things I think Emery got wrong or did wrong or that are disappointing me about Emery and still not mean that I think Emery should be sacked. So I do have some critical thoughts about how he approached this game, about some of the things that are going on that he's doing. But that's because I'm sitting in front of a microphone talking about this game. So it's kind of what I'm supposed to do is give you my thoughts, and Clive and Tim will give theirs, and they may be very different. But I think that it is fair game on an individual game-by-game basis to have criticisms of the manager. That does not mean that somehow you are Emery out or Emery in. And I think Andrew made this point on the Arscast, and it's well made, that, because everything became Arsene out and Arsene in towards the end of his reign, we have forgotten that you can analyze and critique a manager without having any position on their ability to stay in the position of manager of Arsenal. So with all that having been said by way of caveat, Emery out, the fucker. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So I thought there were some specific issues with this game. Now, Tim, one of the things that I think happens with a game like this, it reminds me a little bit of the opening game of the season where we're like, well, let's write off these points and try not to make too much of it. And I think there was a similar sense going into this game. So, I am sympathetic to the idea that, look, Manchester City are far beyond where we are at the moment. And so to some extent, you write it off. I think that has to be balanced against the fact that we are still a pretty powerful Premier League club that should be able to compete at some level on the pitch with any other club. And I thought that we had a few really key decisions wrong right from the start, and that means the lineup. So I'm curious how you felt about what wound up being kind of a 4-4-2 with Iwobi and Kolasinac on the wings, and then the two up front.
Yeah, Emery always has a bit of a surprise, doesn't he? Basically,
I thought it was a back three when they posted the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was going to be a back three as well, and actually it took me a little while to work out, because the thing is, Kolasinac being really high up the pitch doesn't necessarily mean he's not playing at fullback.
That's how he plays fullback.
yeah. I remember after 7 or 8 minutes when I hadn't quite twigged what was going on, I kind of remarked to one of the guys I go with. I was like, "Look, he's the furthest player forward again," and until I kind of realised that, oh no, that is actually meant to happen, and it does kind of say, and so. First off, I'm actually all right with the idea of Kolasinac as a winger. Usually, whenever a fullback is good going forward, everyone says, oh, why don't we play him on the wing? Which fundamentally misunderstands why a fullback is usually very good at going forward, because usually it's about running into space and combining with the wide man. And as much as Kolasinac does that, I think he's so powerful on the ball that he can beat a man as well. I think he can do that and get into the same positions. So I'm actually all right with the thought of him as a winger. In certain games, I prefer that idea to the thought of him as a left back in a back four. The majority of home games, I'm kind of all right with him playing there because we need to be a bit adventurous. But against if you told me it was a back four and Kolasinac was playing left back against Man City, I'd be concerned about that. So I understand why he did that. Iwobi on the right, I think we've spoken about this a lot. I don't think Iwobi on the right has ever really worked. But short of giving Denis Suarez a debut, I don't really see, once you commit to that kind of formation, this illustrates why we kind of needed, whether it's Denis Suarez personally, but we need a player like that because particularly without Mkhitaryan, we're so short of options. And honestly, I understand, right, that the need for defenders, but I'm staggered that people think we don't need a player like Denis Suarez, like absolutely staggered.
I said this last week on the Patreon podcast, Tim. So,
yeah. I'm just like,
doesn't make either of you right, by the way.
I've just been like, you don't think we need wide players?
Well, I think we need wide players. I think the debate was more whether Denis Suarez is a wide player. I mean, I would make the argument he could have used Aaron Ramsey on the right and Iwobi on the left and not used Kolasinac as a winger. And I push back slightly, Tim, on the idea of Kola being a decent winger because, so I can understand if you had a Bakary Sagna at the club and you played him like on the right wing in a game like this, and you said, he's so defensively strong that I'm willing to give up what he gives us going forward to be a little more defensively strong. I don't think any of us would argue that Kolasinac is particularly defensively strong, and while he's decent running into space and has created a lot of chances from overlaps, first of all, you don't get a lot of overlaps if you don't have sustained possession in the final third. But the other thing that really is problematic about Kola, and we saw it in this game, he is a terrible passer of the ball. He is awful in possession, and I think he completed about 56% of his passes in this game. I think total he completed 10 passes. So Guendouzi and Torreira had some decent possession, and they passed at a decent clip, 40, 50 passes at 90% roughly, but Kolasinac just is not competent on the ball in possession, and given that we weren't going to be parked in the final third playing overlaps, I would have rather Emery just leaned into more natural positions. Iwobi on that wide flank where he's really good in the middle third, I think. Ramsey on the right flank. Iwobi on the left flank, Ramsey on the right flank. And just have guys that are going to comfortably pass at 80% and are a little bit stronger on the ball in more natural positions. I thought using Kolasinac there was too clever by half, and it didn't work for me.
I totally take the point on the possession. He is genuinely dreadful at that, and a lot of that is because he's so one-footed, and he will panic himself and he will tie himself in knots trying to use his left foot, which is just a big bugbear of mine.
Tim, we did have some chances to break where he got the ball in the middle third, and that's the worst case scenario for him. Is how do you get around City's press? You play it out wide. You need that wide person to be a good distributor from the middle third to play it into the on-running Lacazette and Aubameyang, and that is not his game at all.
See, I see that slightly differently in terms of, and don't get me wrong, it didn't work out like this, but I understood it from the start because he's got power that a lot of our players don't have. Like, what did he want on the flanks? He wanted Iwobi and he wanted Kolasinac. What does that tell you? He was looking for that burst in the final third. And Iwobi's not particularly powerful, but he carries the ball at a fair clip. He's not a sprinter, but he carries the ball quickly and with a fair amount of urgency. And Kolasinac has just got that physicality, and that's why I'm okay with. I think he's a wing back, but that's why I'm okay with him on the wing, because I think he can get past players. And I think what Emery was looking at was, we're not going to have that much possession of the ball. And frankly, what is really the point in trying to kind of maintain possession and play with our food a bit in the final third against City? We're not going to get the chance to do that. They'll probably press us out of it. And actually, we're probably better off with guys who can break. And that, I think, was the thinking, that Kolasinac can give you that little bit of power going into the final third to make the most of transitions. Obviously, it didn't work out like that, and yes, your points on his technical shortfall is very well made, but I think that was the thinking behind it, and I don't think Ramsey quite gives you that. Ramsey would give you the ball retention, I think, because he protects the ball very well, but I think Emery was thinking, well, you know what, we're going to have to score goals to win this game, and therefore we need players who are going to progress us up the pitch. So that's what I think he was thinking, and I think the thinking there was was fairly sound, albeit, to be quite honest, I didn't think anything we were going to do would work. And I think the conversation about this game and about Arsenal in general is not so much, I kind of agree with the write it off thing. This game went exactly as I expected. I got the score right and everything. Everyone around me was like, yeah, 2-0, 4-2, 3-1, regulation defeat. The conversation is more, why do we feel like that? Why do we feel so sure that we will lose these games easily? Whereas Chelsea, even at this moment in time, Chelsea go there next week. I wouldn't be too surprised if Chelsea managed to get a result or were far more competitive than we are.
Well, I think they'll get slaughtered. But I take your point, which is that there is a good question as to why Arsenal should be in a position where going to places like City and Liverpool and all the other big 6 away fixtures should just be an automatic write-it-off loss, which it has been for years. And we're seeing that goes beyond Arsene Wenger, which was the presumed problem for a long time. I want to stay...
And there's Sorry, I just wanted to sum that thought up with one sentence. There's a difference between not being favourites and being absolutely certain of defeat.
Yes, I agree with that. And being easily beaten in the second half like we were, and we'll come to the second half later. But Clive, I don't want to meander into the where we are as a club sort of existential talk just yet. So if we could, I want to stay on one other thing about the setup. You can certainly talk about Kolasinac and Iwobi. I'd also like to talk about the decision to start with 2 up front, because I think he got that wrong too. Don't get me wrong, I think the best part of our play this season has been Lacazette and Aubameyang, and I can understand why you want to keep them together. This game, I thought it was a real miss. I think he had the opportunity to drop one of them. I don't care which. City suppressed chances tremendously well. We're not going to have sustained final third pressure. If you're going to win it or get anything, it's probably with the odd goal like we got with the equalizer early in the game. I think you need the extra possession and the extra control, and he could have had an extra midfielder in there if he'd gone with more of like a 4-5-1, a 4-4-1-1. I mean, do you have any problems with his decision to go 2 up front?
I don't think it was a critical part of the game. I think when you walk into these games, just think what is he trying to achieve. All right, so I hadn't seen this formation before. I hadn't seen it with the balance of players, that he used. And the key thing for me was the fullback protectors, the doorman, right? The doorman was Kolasinac and Iwobi. And they were up against De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva on one side, and the other David Silva and Sterling on the other side, right? So he knew that City wanted to go inside the gap between fullbacks and centre halves like they do all the time and score 5-a-side goals. So his reaction to that was, I want 2 strong defenders in wide areas in front of 2 strong fullbacks. I say that strong with inverted commas for Arsenal fullbacks, right? And that was basically it. They funny enough, they don't overload in the centre. So our 2 of our best players for me was Torreira and Guendouzi, right? And why was that? Because they did well in their battles, because it was 1-on-1. The real issue was out wide, and the real failing was out wide. And then when you see failure of something working, you then question the system and the tactics. Tactically, I fully understand what he was trying to do. Did it work? No. Then you ask yourself, why? Why didn't it work? It didn't work because of the quality of player. The players that we have in those situations are not rounded enough, not strong enough, not tactically aware enough, not astute enough, don't watch their shoulders, don't understand how to track runners, can't retain possession when under pressure in the first 2 minutes of the game. They make basic mistakes like get their head down, don't get their head up, like we spoke about many, many times, and completely blow the game plan in the first 2 minutes. You have to, so it's all about your perception. Is it quality or is it system? And for me, it's obvious there's a quality gap, which goes to half answer Tim's point. Is why were we so sure this is going to end up in a defeat? Because basically the quality of player we have is not quite up to the mark. We can squeeze something out of this group occasionally, and some of that is some of that's physical, whether we got a physical level, and some of that is whether we're at home. Because when we're at home for big moments, we tend to stand up. And that's just where we are. The last 2 years, we have not sustained performance 3 times a week consistently. I can't tell you last time Arsenal won 3 times a week. I just can't even remember, right? And definitely not 2 big games. So then he goes on to the connection up top. Well, he could have put Ramsey in there and did the runabout bit in the middle of the pitch and tried to connect us to the centre forward. I saw Lacazette doing lots of tracking, lots of challenging, lots of pressing, doing the role that Ramsey did. I didn't see 2 strikers in a flat line. I saw 2 strikers sharing the job of coming deep.
That's fair. Yep.
And then you ask yourself, why don't we have 2 strikers on the pitch? Because they're our best 2 players and they're our best chances of scoring. So if they're our best chances of scoring, why wouldn't you pick them? Right? So if you're telling me that the role that Lacazette played, Ramsey could do it better, well, I debate. I absolutely debate. I think the 4 down the middle were our best players, maybe along with Koscielny. Right? So for this day, on a day when we were doomed to defeat, there is a bigger question, and Tim's actually hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of this is happening around tactics versus strategy versus what we're thinking our identity is, and it's a byproduct of ourselves as individual fans having our own identities and trying to impart that on the manager rather than trying to understand what he's trying to achieve and how he's trying to achieve it. And that's why you get the fraction. That's why you get the lack of understanding. That's why you get, if I don't know what I'm seeing, I don't like it, and I want changes of key people. And that's what we're seeing over the weekend.
That's a fair point.
And I find it incredibly frustrating that what we should be doing is try to understand what he's doing. You don't have to agree, but understand it. Try to understand it before you spout off rubbish that we've been seeing. And not everyone can,
I want you to know something. I don't need any invitation or understanding to spout off rubbish. Let's just be clear about that. I'm ready to fire that from the moment I wake up till the moment I go to sleep.
And when I say this, I say it very carefully. I have no desire for everyone to think like you do, Elliot, or like I do, or like Tim does, because it would be a very boring world if we all thought the same. There will be no debate, no conjecture, no nothing. But I think there needs to be a level of understanding about where we are, and I don't want to go into that bit because that's the bit.
That's the existential bit. And look, I want to be clear about something, right? It's why I said what I said at the beginning of the podcast. You can have questions about the choices he made in this game. That's the job of analyzing. And some of that is post hoc, right? Where you've seen the game so you can see what didn't work. There's nothing wrong with that.
Some of that's very emotional. And that's allowed, by the way.
Sure, it is. There's nothing wrong with watching a game and then saying, here are the things that didn't work. Now, it's a little wrong if you say, here are the things that didn't work and I knew it wouldn't all along. I mean, then you're wise after the fact, which is my best kind of wise, I would say. I want to get to some praise. I think there is specific praise that we're going to come to because I think there is praise for Emery and a player. I'm going to just tease that for a moment, but before we do, let's get back to criticism so I feel safe in my home. Tim, to Clive's point, is it system or is it quality? I would argue that Emery's system maybe isn't getting the most out of us going forward, and that system more than quality. But I will certainly agree with Clive that it is quality over system defensively, that there comes a point where you can't defend with these players. And Lichtsteiner, certainly not up to it. Now, I will say this, talk about being wise after the fact. People are hammering the Lichtsteiner acquisition. I think Bellerin played more than 50 games last season. Lichtsteiner was meant to be a cheap, experienced Europa League and Carling Cup rotation for Bellerin. He was not meant to be our starting right back. I have some sympathy with that. Mustafi is just, you know where I stand on the guy. I don't need to ramble on about it, but he should have had a penalty and potentially a red card. Do they even do that anymore? Is it just the yellow now? Moral of the story is, terrible defensively there. Iwobi sticks us in the shit with the giveaway early that leads to the first goal. And again, I'm not trying to kill Iwobi, but I certainly think when players make errors like that, that is not on a manager. So do you have some sympathy for Emery for the fact that those individual errors and the lack of quality in our defensive third are making it very, very difficult? Because once you concede a goal in a football match, you totally stand everything on its head. Your tactics, your approach, what you need to do. And they say in boxing, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Every manager has a plan until they concede the first goal. And when you have individual errors like that, your plan goes out the window. So is that really where talent more than system is causing the problem?
I think so. Yeah. albeit certainly if you're a team in the top six, and therefore you have to be, to borrow a term Emery used last summer, a protagonist. It's fine for teams in mid-table or lower to put out pretty much any four defenders and then just stick like six teammates around them all the time, and then you can defend well. But it's different at a top six club when the impetus on you to attack, and rightly so, because you have that quality of player. You get to set the tone and the rhythm for the game. So for a top six defence, depending on how you play, I think it is a quality issue, unless you go totally, Jose Mourinho and his pomp. And don't get me wrong, he had very good defenders, but again, he kind of built a wall of muscle around them, which made their job a little bit easier. And, we spoke about this after the Chelsea game with Arsenal. We kind of protected our defence much better, but we were able to because we scored the first goal. So we kind of had a bit more control over the space, whereas we don't. And you're right, the first goal pretty much always changes these games. And so the United game, for example, I thought we were fine at 0-0 at home to United. I thought we were absolutely fine. I thought, they had carried some threat on the break, but I thought we were controlling it. But once you go 1-0 down against a team that wants to counter-attack, that's it, really. And, it was the same for us against Chelsea at 0-0. We weren't on top, but we score first, and there you go.
Spurs game at home too.
So, yeah. So a lot of these games are decided that way. Yes, I do think it's a quality thing. I'll be honest, I still probably expected a little improvement, not a huge improvement. And I think I've been fairly consistent on the idea that I don't, Arsenal's defence is ageing. We're regularly, Lichtstein, look at the defence we put out. Like Lichtstein is 35, Monreal's 32, Koscielny's 33, and Mustafi. That's a defence that's going to change very soon by hook or by crook. So I think I would be more inclined to judge us defensively next season, depending on what happens this summer. And I think Arsenal are going to have to raise some funds this summer, and I don't know how much we'll get for him, but selling Mustafi just seems like a fairly obvious way of generating some funds. I mean, he's 26. And I'm sure a club of our level won't take him, but I'm sure he's not completely unsellable. But it's kind of symptomatic of the fact that Emery just doesn't quite have the players he wants. Rob Holding looked good in the Arsenal defence, albeit I think it's being played up. His performances are being a bit more played up since he got injured, because this kind of causation thing between Holding got injured and it all went to shit. He was doing fine. He wasn't absolutely outstanding. It's just he had, I think, the physicality and the profile to play in an Emery defence, and that's all it was. It's not because he's the next Maldini. It's just he kind of fits. And Emery, I think, demands a lot physically from his players, and he's not really got that many of that type of player in his defence at his disposal, except for Bellerin, and Bellerin's like the only other one who's really covered himself in any sort of glory this season. And we can see it going forward as well. I think the thing is, what we're learning about Emery, in my opinion, is that he prefers generalists over specialists. So he prefers players with a wide range of skills that they're quite good at, which is why he's going to play like Denis Suarez over Mesut Ozil. Ozil has a particular skill that is absolutely top class in terms of his final ball, but he's not interested. He doesn't want him. Ramsey has a particular skill in breaking forward from the midfield and finding space in the box. He doesn't really want him, but what he wants is Iwobi, Mkhitaryan, Guendouzi, Suarez, these kind of generalists, and I think he probably wants some of those in defence as well, and he hasn't really got them. He hasn't got the athletic profile. That said, I do think the fact that we're chopping and changing every single week does mean that it's difficult. for that defence and probably that team to really connect the dots. Then again, a big caveat you have to give Emery is the injury situation. It's constantly disruptive, and it's been disruptive at really bad times as well. You look after we beat Bournemouth in late November, and you looked at it and you thought, okay, something's coming together here. And then we go to Old Trafford a week later and we lose Holding. And then, we play Chelsea and you think, okay, something's beginning to happen here with this defence. And then bang, we immediately lose Bellerin. It's at our highest points, we've lost important cogs from the defence. So I think he definitely deserves is the right words, but I think he has those caveats.
Yeah, and especially, look, I mean, there are some managers for whom swapping in and out fullbacks wouldn't matter very much. I think with Emery, you can certainly say that is a particularly significant area, and the distance, the cavernous distance between Bellerin and Lichtsteiner, it's not a decent right back for an okay right back. It's a phenomenal right back with real flair at both ends for a player who's totally washed up. And Clive and I did a Patreon podcast about Denis Suarez's arrival, summing up the transfer window generally, and then a big section on tactics, and it's really excellent, and Clive was good too. But no, one of the things we talked about is that, Emery wants Swiss Army knife players because he wants to be able to change up his approach from game to game, and so he needs players that are flexible in that way. I do want to come on to some praise, though, and here's what I think is interesting about this game. I thought the second half was a shambles, and we can come on to that. I thought after we equalized, which was totally against the run of play, we were a mess after we conceded for a while, but we equalized. The period from after we equalized until right around when we let them have the second was a very competent performance, with periods where we were on top and they were on top, but it felt like a much more even contest between two relatively even teams, relatively. And that period was encouraging. And, I thought after we conceded the second, right at the end of the first half, terrible timing, we came out at halftime and just didn't look like we felt we could get a result. But I think one of the reasons we looked so good is because of the way Torreira and Guendouzi played, and Guendouzi in particular. Clive, it is really becoming clear to me that the storyline of this season is those two in particular developing, and Guendouzi specifically turning into a potential superstar. At 19, he was our best player. He was as good as anyone on the pitch, I felt. Defensively, he still has work to do, of course, like anybody at Arsenal. But some of the range of passing, the versatility of his passing, his eye, his confidence, the way he rides challenges. Now, sometimes I think he relies on the referee to bail him out a little too much, but he rides challenges. God, if he doesn't get kicked to shit every game because of his willingness to just hold the ball in close situations. He's very press resistant in that way, and I just think it's phenomenal. And I think if Emery deserves praise for anything, it may be sticking with Guendouzi, because here's a manager who came into a big club, and you think he's going to want to prove himself right away and really achieve something so that he can establish himself at Arsenal. But he had the courage to start with Guendouzi right from the start of the season, to stick with him all season long when people were sort of starting to tilt their head and say, should this guy be playing? And you could say, well, that's to the detriment of the team. But I think our future is in large part dependent on developing a talent like Guendouzi into a superstar. And that seems to be happening before our eyes, and it wouldn't have been if Emery took the easy way out and just played older players with more experience. So, I mean, how impressed were you with Guendouzi and just in general, Emery's vision to kind of stick with him all season long and let him go on this trajectory?
Yeah, well, you haven't left me a lot left there to answer, to be fair, Elliot.
All right, well, then we'll move on.
So, if you listen back to the remember we did Inner Spotlight and Guendouzi.
I think we need another one, yeah.
Yeah, and we no. If you played that now, you'd think we were geniuses, because we went big on him, really big. And I started to think, okay, when we had a bit of a dip and when he was getting run off his shoulder, I started to think, oh dear, maybe we've gone too big on him. But the reason why we did, or the reason why I did in particular, was you just got to remember the context by which he is playing well. He's 19 years of age. He has come from another league, settling in, and he has walked into our dressing room and he has taken over. It's quite as simple as that. And in no time at all, he will be our best player. And that's it, right? We have a budding superstar in our hands, and it's difficult for people to absorb that, but that's it. That's what he's doing at 19 is Cesc-like. Right? And
that is exactly what I was thinking. He is the best young player at the club since Cesc Fabregas. I haven't seen a teenager with his personality and skill at that age in that position since Cesc.
Yeah, and what's different is the lens by which these players develop, because even as recently as when Cesc was 18 and basically 1920 running the team with Thierry Henry and playing in a Champions League final, I can't remember the age, he might have been 17, Tim, or 18 at Champions League final, I can't quite remember. But and when he was doing that, there was not the absolute lens of what he couldn't do as there is today. And if you just project forward to what this guy's doing in a team without a Thierry Henry, without a Robin van Persie, without that player that Arsenal have always had at that period, we always had, even when we weren't doing so well, the player of the year or somebody who was very close in the top three. We haven't got that at the moment. We haven't got those sort of players. And this kid has come in and is running the show. And he doesn't get it right every week. But I've looked at the phases of what Emery's trying to do, and I've said before that I think this season is about discovery. He's got to discover his players, and once he works out who is one of his own, he invests in them. He invests in them by overplaying them or by resting them and preparing them. This season is about discovery and financial restructure and changing the contract base at our club and making sure that we can rebuild next year with the funds that are available. And so there have been times when we've all felt it. Maybe he should have rested him for that game. How come he's always playing? And then when you see that performance, you say, that's why the manager's investing in him. He has gone up against Kevin De Bruyne and has not looked shabby at all. Right? There is nowhere else for him to go in this league. If you can do that, it's only Paul Pogba's next. And after you've done that, you've done it, mate. You're there. You're running the show. You're the best midfielder in the country. And that's where he'll be in a year's time. I guarantee it. He is a very special player based on what he's providing right now, his personality. He has got that superstar quality that we are lacking in many of our other players at the moment. And hopefully, touch wood, nothing happens to him injury-wise.
Well, that worries me because he does get kicked. And you're a good player when other really good players are so frustrated by your strength and possession or your ability to step past them, that good players on good teams are just having a kick at you. And that's happening to him every week. And it's worrying. I think, we recited this on a previous pod. I can't remember which one because they all blend together to me into this sort of morass of audio about Arsenal. But he is, I think, third most fouled player, and the two ahead of him have played like 500 more minutes than him. So it's a worry. I mean, Tim, before we take a break, I want to make sure you get a chance to step in here, and I want to phrase our chance to praise Guendouzi here in a negative way so that it stays firmly on brand for me. I loved watching Torreira and Guendouzi in this game, and I loved Guendouzi having the responsibility he was given in that role, and I loved the way he responded to it. There is no denying Granit Xhaka's importance to the way we progress the ball. The statistics scream that, and yet I love this pairing, and I think this pairing has fewer of the weaknesses than you get with Granit Xhaka. Now, I'd love to see a midfield trio of the three of them, and some people say that's too defensive, and maybe it is. I guess my question to you is, with Guendouzi looking like he's on a tremendous upward trajectory like this, how do you feel about this pairing staying as our central midfield pairing going forward and potentially meaning Xhaka spends a little more time on the bench?
Yeah, it's interesting actually that we haven't heard. Maybe I missed it. I haven't heard why Xhaka wasn't playing. I assume an injury, but nobody's really asking that question. That tells you a lot about how well those two performed. And the big positive takeaway from this game is, if you're looking at who we're searching for, what is Emery trying to do? Like, where are we going? What are we doing? Well, probably the two most obvious players who are part of Arsenal 2.0 for the next 4 or 5 years are Guendouzi and Torreira, and they were our best players. They were the players that played with the most personality, and I think Clive makes a good point that they were in one-on-one situations, whereas City do all their overloading out wide. But that's De Bruyne, Fernandinho. They've both gone up against, and they both come out really, really well, and everyone that I can see seems to think that. Like, it seems unanimous. I saw a tweet from James Ollie on Guendouzi. In the first half, he completed all 22 of his passes and recovered the ball more times than any other Arsenal player. We're talking about generalists here. What more do you want from a central midfielder? And I know, Elliot, you've said a few times, you quite like the idea of him a bit further forward because of his passing. And I understand that. Like, his passing in the final third is really good. Like, he's really good at finding those angles to the fullbacks. I think he's got a wonderful eye for that type of pass. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily play him in a number 10 per se, but that kind of coming from number 8 is really interesting. As to the question about Xhaka, what I've really noticed in this game, but certainly before this game as well, it's not Xhaka that receives from Leno anymore. It's Guendouzi. He's the one who takes the ball on the edge of the 18-yard area. And a lot of that is A, because he's technically incredibly clean. He very rarely gives the ball away. And B, one of the big things that's always discussed about Guendouzi is his character. And, he's always got his chest puffed out and, looks very much like he belongs, which is an incredible asset for a 19-year-old. But he's just got that personality to take the ball, on the edge of his own area. He doesn't care if someone's like up his backside. I happen to like his kind of drawing fouls and things like that. He's got a little bit of snide about him, which is missing in almost every other player in this squad. Mm-hmm. Albeit Torreira did it a couple of times as well during the game, although Torreira was genuinely fouled a couple of times and the referee, I don't want to say didn't spot it, but he didn't seem to think they were fouls. But when Lacazette did the same challenges, he thought those were fouls, which confused me. But anyway,
I saw that.
but
the rare criticism of the referee from Tim. You heard it here first.
This is going to lead into a point here where City don't get punished for that type of thing because they do it all the time.
They do it more than any other team. There's stats about that. Yep.
Yeah, and Spurs as well, and Eric Dyer. They do it all the time, and the more you do it, the more it becomes business as usual, and the less you get punished for it. And Torreira and Guendouzi, at the minute, they're feeling the heat from that because it's Arsenal, and referees, I think, subconsciously just don't believe that, don't have that kind of image of Arsenal. But I think the more you add that little bit of edge to your game, the more you get away with. And those two players, I think, eventually, if they stay as the cornerstones of this team and some other players, kind of start to get managed out, then we can go a long way to changing our image. And that also plays into the point, we were talking about earlier, in terms of why are we always certain that we're going to lose these games and not compete? Well, Torreira and Guendouzi are the ones who competed. And if we had like 6 or 7 other players like that, not necessarily in terms of quality, because I think we have got players of that quality, but of that personality in the team, if we had a few more players like that, and I'm not just talking about players who run around or kick people or draw fouls or whatever. I just mean that it's an intangible, that kind of competitive edge. If we had a few more of those, we'd go to City and we wouldn't be favourites or anything, but we'd think, yeah, we can compete today. Just like, like I said about Chelsea, watch that game, Chelsea City. I bet you, whether they win or not, or whether they get a result, I bet you Chelsea are more competitive. And I think it's because they've got a little bit more of that, in their DNA, and we don't have that. But, players like Guendouzi and Torreira, hopefully are our future, have got a little bit more of that, and that I think is the big positive to take from this game.
Sure, and I mean the one problem you have when two of your best, brightest, hardest working, most impressive young players are central midfielders and potentially deep central midfielders is they really can't win you a game. You know what I mean? I mean, you can say, well, Conte won games for France and Chelsea. I get it, but you still have to score goals to win a game, and so Chelsea do have Eden Hazard. You know what I mean? And he can pick the ball up and beat 2 men and curl one into the postage stamp and win a game that way. And, I think watching City, the crazy thing is, sure, there were times we were pulled out of position defensively because Arsenal, but there were also positions when we were in situations where we were in position defensively and someone like Sterling just beat 2 men off the dribble and totally pulled us out of position. Now, some of that is just bad defending, but I still maintain that it would be lovely to have a player who can do that, and that we really don't. Iwobi can do a little of it, but he's better at it weirdly in the midfield third than he is, in the middle third than he is in the final third in the box. So I don't know. We'll have to see. I want to take a break. I want to come back and talk about the second half and where we go from here. So it is really important now that we are, into the month of February, that we, we really get down to the important business of sorting out your Valentine's Day. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about some sexy underwear, lingerie, ladies' intimates, and then we will come back and talk about something a lot less sexy the second half against City. Stay with us. Okay, everyone, it's time to tell you about our friends at Enclosed Lingerie. You can find them online at The Enclosed, ENCLOSED.com. Enclosed Lingerie is a Lingerie of the Month club. That's right, just like a Beer of the Month club, only better, because it's a high-end luxury lingerie gift for you and your partner that's going to enhance the intimacy in your relationship. Right now, if you put in Arsenal at checkout, they're going to give you $35 off any gift from Enclosed Lingerie. So you're going to want to go to theenclosed.com and sign up now. Look, Valentine's Day is around the corner. What better way to celebrate the romance in your relationship than celebrating Valentine's Day with a gift from The Enclosed? And the gifts keep coming every month. So while it can be difficult to remember to keep the romance, to keep the intimacy in your relationship, The Enclosed has your back. Every month you're going to get that high-end luxury lingerie gift, and it's going to remind you of the importance of romance in your relationship. So do it now. Go to theenclosed.com. There is a perfect fit guarantee, so you never have to worry about the fit. It's beautiful high-end luxury lingerie. Just go to theenclosed.com and enter promo code ARSENAL for $35 off at checkout. Do it now. Okay, we're back. Now that you have beautiful things for you or your partner to wear, or both of you to wear, certainly no judgments here, I want to talk about the second half of the City game. I don't want to talk about, I feel compelled to because, we're doing a podcast about the City game. So, Clive, the second half did not go great. Obviously going down 2-1 just before the half, bad timing for that to happen. But the way we came out in the second half was, I think, not ideal. And, Pep made some tweaks, and then, we didn't have a shot on target, period. Which makes it very hard to come back and win a game. But I just felt in the second half that they were kind of playing with their food a little bit, and that we never really imposed ourselves or looked like we were going to get back into it. Anything specifically you noticed or thought changed? I mean, there was a lot of hard running and a lot of work that we had to do in the first half, just trying to keep them out and chasing the ball and not having possession, which is what we're not used to. Do you think it's as simple as we just tired and kind of gave up the ghost, or is there something else that you saw?
No, I think we physically dropped. You look at the game in 4 quarters. We had the second quarter, and I think we're unlucky to concede in that period. And when you're looking for hope tactically, in that second quarter when we were doing really well, we all sat up, didn't we? We all thought, this is looking quite good. How we got them a little bit shaky, right? And then we concede that goal, which seemed almost out of the blue, and they rocking at half time, feeling confident. And we lose confidence, and it comes back to me, a lot what Tim was saying, and I agree with 100%, is having the personality players that understand the requirements of playing for Arsenal Football Club. Right? And we need more of those players that walk into these places and believe they can win. And we haven't got enough of those, right? And some of the ones we used to have, we hate them today, and because they left us for whatever reason. But man, they had a strut. They didn't play well every week, but they had a strut. And if they were getting beat at these places, they would win the fight in the tunnel, right? So, and we haven't got that anymore. We've got a nice bunch of footballers that look after themselves, look after their contracts, look after their families, right? So we haven't got enough. So
you're saying we need someone like Theo Walcott back in the team?
Yeah, I've just seen a spread on Theo Walcott. Funny enough, it was coming out on Talk Sport, basically saying that they're not sure if he's even still a footballer. He's dropped that far off the cliff, and people thought he'd retired. And that was a player that we gave 10 years to Arsenal and paid him many millions. And
gave him a toaster. Don't forget.
I'll come back to that later. I've got a big thread coming on tomorrow about that, so watch out for that one, right?
The only person allowed to plug their future writing is Tim, so please stay in your lane.
Yeah, I've got one coming, right? Watch out, one of my train threads. So yeah, I you know me, Elliot. I player type wise, we haven't got it, mate. We haven't got it.
Okay,
and we
but I mean,
we have got the We haven't got the physicality in our team to sustain the level of performance that we require to perform in this system, which is basically a lot of it is off the ball. We haven't got the monsters that Spurs have got. The hard-running centre midfielders are plenty that can be rotated that Liverpool have got. And we haven't got the sprinters and the wide wingers that City have got. Right, so we have a lot of one-pace aging players that can sustain it for a certain period of time. Too many 60-minute players, and that's why we can't win these games away, because we can't sustain the level of performance. We can do it at home in comfortable environments, particularly when we score early and dictate the story of the game. Away from home, we haven't quite got that confidence and personality to deliver that. And we've had 3 years watching this, so we all know 21 games is it now? We haven't won away from home. 21 games. We've drawn 7. I think lost 15 of that 21.
Yeah.
And so
I'd prefer to do better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer to do better. So what do we see tactically? I'll tell you what we saw. We saw players looking after their legs, looking after their bodies, because they couldn't quite sustain any longer. They couldn't quite stay the runners. They certainly did not have the power and the step to do the work defensively and then step out with control, accuracy, technical security to travel up the pitch in a unit. What happens when you're under stress? You stay where you are. You stay deep. You try to protect your goal, and I'm close to saying there was at 3-1 there was a professional handshake to say maybe this does both of us. Okay, we don't want to kill them too much, and maybe you just sit where you are for now. And it was almost close to that. I'm not saying it was, because there's a lot that never happens in the Premiership. It happens in Italy a lot, but not here. But I'm telling you, it was. I take it, they took it. Shake hands, get on the bus.
Yeah, and I mean it was. It was dispiriting, but unfortunately, there was a second half that had to be played. And Tim, I'm sort of curious what your thoughts were on the decision to bring Denis Suarez on in the position where he did. Because, look, I think you just have to throw that performance away and say, I'm not even going to read into it with respect to what we're getting from Denis Suarez. And maybe Emery had sort of the same idea, which is, look, it's going to go poorly for him, but I need to try to get him match fit. So let him run around against, arguably the best or certainly the second best team in the country. For you, was it a crucial mistake putting a player in an impossible situation, or potentially a savvy way to just get some minutes in his legs?
I think the latter. I think we can kind of overthink substitutions sometimes, particularly when the game states like that. Yeah. To be honest, I don't think there was any deep philosophical reason behind it. You can ask why Suarez was put on and not Ozil, for example. I think the answer's fairly straightforward there, because Emery doesn't see Ozil as part of his plans as much as he sees Suarez, and it was just give him some minutes in his legs. Iwobi's cooked. I need to bring someone on who can do roughly a similar thing. I don't want to bring like a number 10 on in Ozil, because that completely changes our formation and what we're trying to do. So it was pretty much a like-for-like swap, wasn't it? I don't think it goes any deeper than that. And yeah, I think giving him a couple of minutes, and look, he had a fairly horrible couple of minutes, but I'd much rather him pass the ball into touch and miss some runs, shall we say, a couple of times in this scenario than I would at Huddersfield on Saturday. So maybe it had some value there, but it probably didn't, to be honest. But I don't think there's much to be said about that or to be gleaned from it.
Well, then let me stay with you just for 1 second. I never get sick of complaining about the same thing. I mean, it's pretty clear. But even I am getting sick of discussing, worrying about, debating about, analyzing the Mesut Ozil situation. Is there anything left to be said other than, for whatever the reason, which we will never know completely, Mesut Ozil is not going to play for Unai Emery, and that we will see him occasionally this season because we almost have to. You can't just freeze him out totally, but that we just have to accept that Mesut Ozil's time as an important player at Arsenal is over, and as soon as we can shift him, we will. And is that really the end of the inquiry there? Is that all there is left to be said?
I think so, yeah. I mean, look at the game he started him, home to Cardiff. I mean, I think that's a pretty clear, that's the type of game you're going to start from now on.
To be fair, I thought he did well, by the way.
I thought he was quite 7 out of 10. It was fine. But ultimately, he doesn't want to player like that in his system. Like I said, he seems to prefer these generalists. He really liked Welbeck. He really seems to like Mkhitaryan. He really seems to like Iwobi. Likes Ozil and Ramsey a little less. So that's the type of player he wants, and that's the vision he's got for the team. I think perhaps the debate around Ozil is dying down because there is very little to say about it, and I think everyone knows where they stand at this point. So I think the debate is dying. Maybe I just kind of missed it. It'll always recur to some degree, and for that reason, amongst others, it's just better for there to be a clean break as quickly as possible. But to be honest, I'm not quite. I don't really mind. To be honest, like, again, we're all talking about searching for meaning and things like that. I don't really mind the manager saying, do you know what, I've got no use for Mesut Ozil, because like you said earlier, or actually no, I think this was on the Arscast Extra earlier, they were saying like we've had teams built around Ozil and it's not really worked. And yeah, I'm kind of relaxed to some degree about. Well, I'm relaxed about like Ozil and Ramsey going. I think the circumstances are regrettable, like not getting money for Ramsey and having this whole thing hanging over us with Ozil. But I'm fine to move on from them, and I think I've invested all I can emotionally into the whole Ozil thing, so I don't really mind. And to be honest with you, I think his performances have been entirely inconsistent. I don't really see that changing at this point, and I'm happy to move on at this stage. Yeah,
I mean, the only thing I would add to that is I have some sympathy. Again, let's emphasize that word so you don't jump all over me. Some sympathy with the claim of Ozil not being consistent, only because I don't see him having been given any opportunity to become consistent. I mean, again, I'm not saying over his Arsenal career. I'm saying this season specifically. If it was any other player playing as infrequently as Ozil is, we might be defending him by saying he just hasn't had a chance to get into a rhythm, in this team. So I think there is some of that. At the end of the day, I agree with you that I am ready to move on from him, and probably have been for a while. But the problem, of course, is the one that we always come back to, and it's tedious to mention it, but it's that salary. And if we can't move him and he's on those wages and we're not using him, it's just a tremendous amount of the resources plugged into the squad going nowhere. Which, is, and again, that's not Emery's fault. The original sin is giving him the contract to save face when we were losing Alexis already. It just, look, Ivan Gazidis is a mug, and that's all it comes down to. And yes, I'm blaming Ivan Gazidis for everything. If you disagree, fine. That's where I'm at. That's where my head's at. Clive, why don't you wax lyrical about Mesut Ozil and your love for him for a bit, but also let's try to sneak in what I think might wind up being a more important moment here. Late in the game, Mustafi comes off, Mavropanos comes on. Obviously, not nearly enough of a look at Mavropanos to have any opinion of his performance, but I couldn't help, as Mustafi was trudging off the field, hoping that he never trudged back on one again. I tend to think that his Arsenal career doesn't have much longer to go. Do you think we could start to see the manager lean away from using him?
If Mavropanos plays well, I think that will be done. But for me, our best two defenders are Socrates and Koscielny.
Yes,
and I think it's Holding and I want it to be Mavropanos just behind them, right? So if Koscielny goes, Mustafi goes, and Koscielny I think has got 1.5 more years his contract, I believe. So if Koscielny goes to the south of France because he absolutely deserves to, with Arsenal blessing, Socrates stays and helps nurture through Mavropanos, and I hope we buy somebody and use some of the cash we get for Mustafi to help us with that purchase, right? And that person should, in my opinion, be a left-sided centre half of real stature and with a left foot, because that's what we don't have. So that's what I would do if I was in charge of recruitment, and I'll spend a lot more money on full-back options. I would buy 3, right, and get rid of 3, and I would buy a right back and 2 left backs. But that's me. Mustafi, I'm sick of looking. I used to play centre midfield when I used to play, and when you look behind you and play in centre midfield, you normally look behind you and see the biggest, fastest, strongest players in your team, and they give you a level of security. If I was playing centre midfield and I saw that guy behind me, I would walk on the pitch with an inhaler and blood pressure tablets at my side at all times, because he does not give me any security at all. This is no surprise. For me, it's always a bad recruitment. Whatever you say about Per Mertesacker, he had a presence in our defence, and his presence and his strengths and weaknesses were so obvious You could have a player around him in Koscielny which covered up his weaknesses and their roles were defined. You can say they had a ceiling, but you knew what you were looking at. When I look at this player, I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know what I've got. I don't know anything. All I know is I have a £35 million, £100,000 a week player in our defence for 2-3 years, and none of us are becoming more convinced that he is improving. So it's something that we do. We hold on to players far too long, and we hope that they're going to come good. I think we have to be a lot more ruthless at Arsenal. Maybe hopefully that'll be part of our new identity, that we need to cut these players loose really, really quickly. And I think this is one of the reasons why we have what I call the Arsenal tax. The Arsenal tax is when we keep players too long and then we sell them at the wrong times and we sell them at losses. We don't sell them at the right time. And so because of that now, our perception in the marketplace is one of where your players come to die. And this is why they can't be sold. They get overpaid with contracts. They're paid more than they're worth. They're not appropriately developed, and they're kept too long. And so you develop a situation where we can't sell, and you have the Arsenal tax. Right? And Mustafi is a classic example of that, and there are many others. And it's a nature. We have to change that, and I think we're starting to change that by our behaviour to some of the players that are previous favourites. We are starting to say, nope, it's not happening. That's not right for us. We need to change this. You're a good player, but Flancy doesn't work. These are players I want to invest in. I'm going to invest in you, Mavropanos. I'm going to invest in you, Guendouzi. And I'm prepared to wait out these 12 months because I can then find out, you'll get an experience, and I can find out what you're all about. And then next season, I can add the pieces that are going to extend your career, support your career, and provide you with the right people around you in all parts of the pitch that can make us more competitive. And then I keep you because your projection is much higher than what people realize. I keep you, I get you signed on the right contract at the right wage, and then I build upon you. And if you don't want to stay, I have you at the right contract, and then you go, and we do not see you walking out the door as a 28-year-old, 29-year-old, 30-year-old for no recompense whatsoever. So this Mustafi is a classic example of that. The sooner we cut him loose, it's going to be painful. But as soon as we cut him loose and just take the £15 million loss, the sooner we can create minutes for Mavropanos, who's playing for the under-23s tonight. And it's a very important game because it could lead to him getting some minutes on Saturday, right? And I think that's really important for the future of our club to find out what he's all about. And if he's there, great, we reinvest next year. If he's not, great, we loan him to make him ready and then buy appropriately in the summer.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the thing you have to worry about in general is the way the age curve works. Sometimes players just tail off slightly, and sometimes they go off a cliff. I mean, I think we're seeing, with Lichtsteiner, he's over the cliff when he arrived. Nacho Monreal looks like he's going over that cliff a little bit. And, Socrates, we don't know what we're going to get from him next season, but we should assume that there may be a big step back in quality and fitness for a player who's been very important this season. I do think we have to bring in another center back, and I think next season it should be Holding, Mavropanos, another center back, and then, Socrates infrequently as needed is probably where we're going to be. Let's start to wrap up, and Tim, just real quick, looking ahead, I mean, look, it was dispiriting performance and loss in some ways. In other ways, just kind of an expected write-off, and we've already touched on why that is and what to make of it. But the fixture computer has kind of been a little bit kind here. We have a full week before we go to Huddersfield, so we can get some rest. Then Bate Borisov away, no fixture between that first leg and the second leg. Then home to Southampton, not the easiest game, but certainly manageable. Home to Bournemouth. Then a full week between the Spurs and United games that are consecutive. So, I mean, the thing that's encouraging here is we can kind of reset. There's time to reset before Huddersfield, and then time to sort of put the Premier League on pause and really get a positive energy around the club by beating Bate Borisov and being through to the next round of the Europa League before having 2 winnable home games in the league again. And things can start to look and feel a lot different because we are, still in touching distance of top 4. The thing I look at is Mkhitaryan. I think his return could be really meaningful. That side of the pitch has been a big problem. We'll integrate Denis Suarez a little bit. Hopefully he'll be very good. But, by the way, the excitement about Mkhitaryan coming back is all my point. Has nothing to do with Clive. He definitely didn't type it into the back channel message here.
I was sitting here going,
look, if we go back far enough, Clive, I was excited about Mkhitaryan coming back from an injury last season. So it's almost like it was my idea.
I know our listeners will call you out very shortly.
You know what? They won't, because I won't pay attention. So Tim, just real quick, in terms of the way the schedule breaks now, the fixtures break, and with a little almost time off for the Europa League and the return of Mkhitaryan, do you think maybe we should just hold our breath before getting too down in the dumps because we have kind of a neat little period here to turn things around pretty quickly?
Yeah. And I listen. I've been probably more complimentary of Mkhitaryan than a lot of people. I think he's very useful. I get the frustrations with him, but I've said many times, I think he's very useful to this team because he's one of the few players that really seems to fit what Emery actually wants to do. So yes, I think that is very handy. I think it's slightly Murphy's Law that we're getting him back at the exact point that we get Denis Suarez. I take your point. It means that we can integrate him and perhaps, him and Iwobi can share some game time for the next couple of weeks. But it would have been quite nice to have Denis Suarez 6 weeks ago because, Iwobi and Mkhitaryan, they were very much buy one, get one free. They came together every single game and now it's just Iwobi. So that tells you kind of how Emery thinks about this and how he thinks about using those kind of two players in the half spaces. I think he'll be incredibly useful. Again, not because I think he's the best player out there, just because there's a lot to be said for, like I was saying about Rob Holding earlier, there's a lot to be said for just being a guy that fits what your manager's trying to do, and he's one of them. So yes, I think that is fortuitous. I think also you're right. The fixtures are fairly kind to us now, and actually, once we clear Man United in March, our run-in is, our run-in's decent actually. We've got some tricky away games, but I don't think we've got any of the top six after March the 10th. So
yeah, it's Spurs, then United, then done.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And if you look at the type of fixture we built that 22 game run on through the autumn, the way the fixture list goes, we're basically getting those fixtures again. Yeah. Effectively, and we were able. And
we'll need the performances to be a little better. I don't think you could count on getting those points with those performances. But yeah, I take your point. That is a very handy thing to have, especially with the Europa League potentially getting serious at that point. Yeah,
exactly. And actually, a lot of 6 of those games in the 22 game unbeaten run were Europa League games, but that comes back into the equation now. And I've been thinking for the last couple of weeks, like a similar run, like I'm not even sure there are 22 games left overall, but a similar run to that again probably gets us 4th. If we can do that again, get similar results, and even if the performances are the same and they weren't hugely convincing, it was still enough. And if we can replicate that again, and we've kind of got the fixtures to try and do that, so that again, that's the positive here. And you're right, the run, not just over the next kind of 4 weeks or
Jesus
so,
Clive.
the run.
Sorry.
The run, like over the next few months, really is pretty good for us. Albeit if we progress in the Europa League. Then maybe and we were able to write a lot of those games off last year and make it a bit of a non-event. But if maybe this is a discussion for another time, but if we get past Borisov, I am all for getting Chelsea in the next round, because I think we have to beat them to win it. And
so get it out of the way or focus on the league. Sorry, exactly. I'll just finish your point instead of letting you finish it more articulately, which was really terrible. I just got thrown off by the heavy breathing in my ear from Clive over there.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it was a little bit weird. But, and look, if you want to have some optimism for the league, Man United, everyone's worried about, Manchester United being the team that could wind up pipping us to 4th. It gets tough for them in the sense that they have PSG, Chelsea in the Cup, Liverpool in the league, Palace away, home to Southampton, PSG again, then Arsenal at Arsenal, then home to City. they could go on an epic lose. You could see them losing to PSG, losing to Chelsea, losing to Liverpool, dropping points at Palace, beating Southampton, losing to PSG, losing to Arsenal, losing to City. And people are going to feel a lot differently about United if that's how their run goes. Then they don't really have another tough fixture other than Chelsea at home in April, but they could be out of the picture depending on how that run goes. And that takes them all the way through March the 16th where they face City at home. So, that I think there's some cause for encouragement there. Not to go all, results, predicting the results before they happen. We on the Arsenal Mouse podcast that I used to do back when that was still a thing, before Tim Clark just got super lazy and stopped caring about football. We used to do the Predictatron. Maybe we can ask to borrow that concept there. And what we would do is we'd literally just sit on microphone, read out fixtures of the teams we were competing with, and say win, loss, or draw, and then tally it all up. It made for great listening. Fantastic radio. But it might be worth doing at some point in the near future because, Tim, you're right to bring up the fixtures. Well, I brought up the fixtures, so I'm right to bring up the fixtures. Because, it does get tough. And Chelsea have it too. They play City away as their next league fixture. They go back into the Europa League. They have Man United in the FA Cup. They have Man City in the Cup final, right? The Carabao Cup final. They have Tottenham. So, and then Liverpool away still in April. United away in April. Yeah, the more I think about it, if we can find a way to just not completely shit the bed against Spurs away and United at home, we're going to be in the reckoning. So maybe something to look forward to. Clive, I've rambled on there on the fixture computer thing longer than I expected. Can you give us like a 30-second wrap-up of your thoughts there so we can say goodbye to everybody?
Okay. I'm a fan, so I'm one of pure hope. We have 13 games to go. And I urge you all to listen to Emery's press conference after this game. Because, our communication has not been great from the club, and Emery's not the greatest communicator, but I think he gave a little bit of insight into how he's looking at this season. I think he spotted exactly what you both have highlighted. We have a set of fixtures now that we can attack. We can attack them. Manchester United at home is not okay. We haven't done well there, but it's a home game, and Spurs away is a special game, and the rest are all very, very winnable if we focus upon them. And I think he literally is talking about that process. He didn't quite say he gave this game up, but he spoke very carefully about City's superiority and said it 4 or 5 times, which basically tell you what was in his mind. How can I play this game in a way that gives me the best chance to walk out of it with my pride? Right? That's how I felt he approached it. So judge the tactics and analysis based on that and what we could achieve, and still while investing in a couple of players. We spoke about Xhaka earlier. He was out of a groin strain. So maybe I was thinking maybe he was being rested for Huddersfield. So maybe I was being too much on the Emery train there.
Emery doesn't rest players. Come on now.
Yeah, exactly. So he had a bit of a groin strain. I'm not sure he's ready for the weekend. But, he's a player I still think is very important for us in the near term, 18 months. After that, we can debate. I think this team will develop away from him. But in the near term, I think he's important. And so I think opportunity is there if we stick with this as a fan group and just stick with that process which is coming. We are going into that points accumulation phase now. And I think if we can start to get back onto that, 30 points is what I think we need. 30 points, right? And that gets us to 87 points. And I think that's a significant turn. Yeah, that's what we need.
87? That's a title. Surely you mean 77.
No. Oh, sorry. 77.
Oh, thank God.
Sorry.
I was like, what?
Yeah, 77.
What?
Yeah, 77. I got that wrong. Sorry. And yeah, I think that's what we need. 30 points. We need 30 points to get us where we need to be, right?
Yeah.
So I like,
we're in agreement now.
Because, yeah. So I just can't add up. I was looking at 57 points for Spurs, which got into my mind, and I can't believe how they've just...
You heard it here first. Clive's a Spurs supporter.
Well, the 57 points, they've basically got, had 6 points there with 3 last-minute wins, which basically bring them right back into the pack where I thought they would be with their current injuries, but they've done really well and managed to stay at distance.
They got lucky.
Right?
They had easy fixtures when Kane was out, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
All
right,
the job.
So what do you think? Are we gonna do it, Clive? We're gonna do it, right? Top
well, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Why not? Why not? What's the point otherwise of walking around every day being an Arsenal fan if you don't believe?
If we can leave this episode on that note, that would be a good thing. So let me screw it up with... No, I'm kidding. Let's leave it there. Tim's on Twitter at Stillberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Great having you back. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Clive, great having you as always.
Thank you, my friend.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Strongly recommend it. Give us 5-star review. Write nasty things about Paul. Oh, please write all the nasty things about Paul and Scott if you want in the review. We are going to do a special Patreon episode this week during the off week before the Huddersfield match. So if you'd be so kind as to sign up there, we'll have some hashtag great content for you there. And for those of you who have signed up, really cannot thank you enough. And we will really focus on putting out some great stuff there. But also for those of you who can't or haven't signed up, we love you as well. And we will concentrate on making the regular pod as entertaining as possible going forward. Apologies for everything that's come before. In any event, we do love you. We do appreciate having you here. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Huddersfield 0.